Hi, everybody. Welcome very much. Thanks very much for coming. It's exciting to see all of you folks here in the room, and I'm not sure where I should be looking to welcome our virtual audience, but hello to the virtual audience. It's exciting to have you guys all here today. David, hello. So thank you all for joining us. We're very excited to have you guys all here to talk about the wild and wonderful world of podcasting. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Matt Schapo. I'm a director here in the IAB Media Center, focused primarily on audio. It gives me great pleasure to welcome everybody here today. I'm going to step out of the in front of you guys. Great pleasure to welcome you all here today on behalf of Matthew Rennie and the entire learning development team here at IAB, and all of these amazing folks are going to be talking to you in just a minute. I hope that you guys have all brought your questions. I can't even count the number of times that I have asked questions of and had extended conversations with this group. And for those of you who know them, I'm sure you will not be surprised to learn that every time I've had those conversations, I have come away a much smarter person, a more knowledgeable person about podcasting. Because these guys are the folks that you came here to see, I'm not going to talk for too long, but I will mention a couple of things up front. The first of which is that we think you made a great decision in coming today. As all of you hopefully know by now, we reported in this year's podcast ad revenue report that podcasting is now approximately a $2 billion a year industry. And as we also reported, we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion by the time we get to 2025. Just a little additional context on that for those of you who may not realize it, by the time we get to that $4 billion number, that will represent 50% of all digital audio. Last year, that number represented about 30%. The year before, maybe 23%. So to be at 50% of all digital audio for podcasting by the time we get to the end of 2025, it's pretty cool. And it represents a very interesting inflection point, and something that I think really speaks to the success that many of you in this space are already having, and the success that I think you all continue to have in this space. And so today we have, again, this remarkable panel. I would just mention a couple other things up front that I wanted to mention. I run the IAB Audio Committee, and for those of you who may not already be members of the IAB Audio Committee, I would like to invite you to join. So please email me at matt@iab.com to do so. We have the very next meeting of the Audio Committee coming up on June 27th. We're going to have some great topics of conversation there. So again, please do reach out. But for the moment, I'm going to step aside and I'm going to join all of you guys in the audience to listen to this great conversation. And I'm going to hand it over to Dave to take it away. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming. Again, my name is Dave Hanley. I'm one of the co-founders of AdvertiseCast and the current Chief Revenue Officer of AdvertiseCast Marketplace, which is now part of Libsyn. So we became part of Libsyn 2 years ago. And again, thanks everybody for coming out, and thanks everybody for joining us virtually. And I think we've got a really great cast of characters here today to talk about all things podcasting. So we're looking forward to it. When I start to think about, when I was thinking about this event, I was kind of thinking about, like then and now, where did we come from as a company and kind of as an industry? We started about 2017. And we were kind of one of the first podcast advertising marketplaces. And we really at that time focused on host-read ads. And really we kind of served the mid-size creators. And it was a simpler time back then. It was, the technology was pretty limited. The host-read baked-in ad was really all we had to work with. And we spent probably 90% of our time, probably 9 out of every 10 individuals that we talked to that wanted to try podcast advertising had never done it before. So we were really mainly educating, the folks that we talked to. And then fast forward to today, as I mentioned, we became part of Libsyn. We still have a marketplace for host-read advertising. Because we're part of Libsyn, who's a hosting platform, we've got a large programmatic operation now. And it really just kind of speaks to the evolution of the industry. Things aren't so simple anymore. We always thought things would get more and more, kind of straightforward, and everybody that's participating in the space would have no trouble figuring out, how they get into podcast advertising and how they actually go about doing it. But, as you're going to hear today, we're going to touch on many of those topics. Things are a lot more complex from a technology perspective, from a capability perspective, and hopefully we'll be able to help those of you who maybe aren't deep in the space kind of decode some of that today and answer whatever questions you have about it. And I think we're obviously still, educating, trying to educate folks who aren't, haven't kind of dipped the toe in the water, and hoping to get more people involved with podcast advertising. So here we are. In terms of the, kind of some of the big questions that we're looking to, kind of answer today, number one, as the industry shifts from something that was really based in direct response to an industry that has a lot more brands coming into the space, how do we navigate that? How do we get more brands off the sidelines that aren't participating, yet in our ecosystem? What tools and technologies are out there today that you should be thinking about and should be, investigating in your podcast advertising pursuits? And what does the future look like? And we'll talk about some of the, we're talking about earlier, in preparation about AI. Like, what does that mean? How does that affect us in the future? And hopefully we can kind of shed a little bit of light on that as well. And let's just go around here and we'll introduce our amazing group of panelists here. And we'll start here with Pete.
Well, excited to be here today. My name is Pete from Podscribe. I'm the founder and CEO.
I'm Jacob, Associate Media Director at Mediahub.
Hi, I'm Bob Hunt, Senior Director of Audio at Hearts and Science.
Hey everyone, my name is Tomas Rodriguez. I'm a Senior Director of Audio Inventory Partnerships at the Trade Desk.
I'm Maria Talon. I'm the SVP of Performance Audio at Horizon Media.
And I'm Corey Kalesa, the Chief Revenue Officer at Veritonic.
In terms of the topics that we're going to cover today, we've kind of broken it out into some, different content areas. We're going to start with, ad share growth and brand investment. We're going to talk about brand safety and contextual targeting, a little bit more on the technology side. Another tech topic, data, measurement, and attribution, something that, has certainly come a long way since the early days. Kind of switching gears a little bit on the creative side, talking about, ad creative formats. And then, like I said, we'll talk about the future, what we see happening down the road and try to make some predictions here. All right, why don't we get started? I'll kind of ask the first, kind of big question for our agency client guests. You've all been vocal advocates of podcast advertising for branding. What's your view on the state of play and shift of brand dollars moving into the podcast advertising space? Something that's been really dominated and was kind of almost created by direct response and performance type advertisers.
Yeah, I can kick us off. I'll set the bar nice and low for everybody else. Yeah, I think it's not surprising. I think there's two things we can look at to kind of, when we say it's not surprising, to kind of predict this growth. First is people, right? How many people are listening to podcasts? I think the latest Infinite Dial said 42% of the US population. It's 120 million people. It's a lot of people. And that number is continuing to grow. It's doubled in the last 7 years. And so, it's natural that marketing dollars are going to kind of follow where people are going. And the second, I think, is, it's driven by the success of performance budgets, right? When DR advertisers keep coming back and back to the space, clearly something's going right because they are seeing a return on their investment. And as the technological capabilities in terms of, creating different copy and rotating that copy and, measuring success beyond just a vanity URL or a coupon code, and we can actually start measuring brand lift and more mid and lower funnel attribution, that becomes more and more attractive to more brand advertisers. And I think that opens the door for more to at least start dipping their toes.
Yeah, and one thing I would just add to that is we have a variety of brands who are very used to buying maybe some streaming audio, right? And trying to get into the audio in that space, right? But one thing we are seeing in the end, we love working with our streaming audio partners, but one thing we're starting to see is more people buying into, say, Spotify Premium or Apple Music or Amazon Music, right? And so within that, more and more people who are just not available with ad-supported streaming, right? And so we're starting to see in the time spent element, there's a lot more opportunity from an ad-supported standpoint in podcasting than there actually is in streaming audio. Now, we've grown a lot in streaming audio, but like when you actually showcase that, and that's even in a further quantify when it comes to higher income audiences as well. And so, I think brands are starting to open up to that, like, hey, this is where the ad-supported opportunity is. So brands who may not be putting 100 promo codes on a website, right? Which again, a lot of people are doing that. There's going to be plenty of that, right? But brands who are not doing that, they see the opportunity there, and then they want it.
I really like this question, specifically because at the Trade Desk, or I'm going to represent the programmatic lens in the room. But, we haven't really dealt with a lot of direct response podcast advertisers. Most of the podcast advertisers that we're working with are focusing on awareness. And when we think about those brands that maybe have been hesitant to advertise in podcasting, those brand awareness brands, what they care about are reaching everybody in the United States, measuring, but not just measuring in a vacuum. They want to know how their podcast buy isn't just doing, but is doing compared to their TV buy. And they also want brand safety. And I think podcasting as a channel has struggled a little bit in all three of those categories. It does have good penetration, like the Infinite Dial said, but maybe not the same penetration as TV has. The brand safety tools, not regulated like by the FCC, similar to radio. So there's some brand safety components there. And the measurement piece, you don't see, I think we'll talk a little bit about this later. You don't see podcasting in MMM quite yet. So there's a little bit of a struggle there right now, but I think we're in the first inning of brand advertisers who want awareness actually seeing the marketplace develop, and they're saying, oh, like I need to invest as this marketplace develops. So I think just in the last 3 years, the innovation that we've had in those three categories is really welcoming a lot of new advertisers and new budgets.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And Tomas, you mentioned brand safety, and I think that's a big topic right now. And around the next kind of category of content that we're going to talk about here is around brand safety as well as contextual targeting. So kind of getting a little bit into the more technology side of things. So as we mentioned, brand safety has obviously become a higher priority for brands that start to invest further in podcasts. For direct host reads, it still seems to remain very much a contextual, vetting show by show type of assignment to identify the content. From your perspective as a data partner or a media buyer, how are your teams looking for better evaluation based on context?
So it's really been a manual process for a long time that we've kind of done in-house. We have our own inclusion lists that we customize by client, but the advances that have happened in even the last few months, whether it's Sounder, Barometer, what Pete's doing at Podscribe, there's a lot of opportunity for AI to streamline this for us. It's really important that it's not just about identifying specific words. The actual context is so pivotal in not just brand safety, but suitability and making sure that the content is aligned with whatever the product is. It's so nuanced, but being able to have partners like that, I think, is really going to be able to allow us to focus on the strategy instead of focusing on scanning shows. It also opens us up to being able to purchase other tactics. So we've been, I think we'll get into this a bit later, but whether we're buying specific host reads or we're buying any sort of run of network, whether it's contextual targeting or actual behavioral targeting, what Barometer and RTI are doing with layering on VAS tags, I think that's going to really open things up to allow us to buy run of network for clients that have been afraid of that in the past. And going off a little bit of what Bob said about clients who were spending in streaming audio and are excited about podcasting, don't really know what to do. It's not quite the same, right? You can't, being on music is going to be more brand safe. Podcasting is not quite that way. So being able to understand brand safety and opening up to this full scale of the space and layering on that, I think is going to really unlock some budgets.
So just jumping in there, a lot of what Maria is saying for outsiders, I think we're in a sort of the middle of the evolution of the brand safety world. So at first, if you were buying on a show, maybe you just take the publisher's word for it, or you dive in there and you have to listen to every show, or in search them, on Google. That was kind of like V1 before there was any, tool out there. I think the next version was, or I think we've slightly moved past, is like a keyword-based brand safety tool where it'll look for the word, crack or, gun or anything like that. But obviously that doesn't get into the nuance of a lot of the content. So, and I think too, there's still a lot of a manual component there where maybe you need to dive in and research every show, and you've got like 1,000 shows in your list. You have to keep going in and diving, looking on the dashboard through them. So I think now we're in the transition to a third stage of brand safety where it's getting definitely past keyword keyword analysis with the latest updates with, say, ChatGPT, which we started using as an example to actually dive into the content, particularly with news. news is perhaps the toughest one to dive into there. What's safe, what's suitable, what's heavily opinion based versus fact based. So in this third wave, it's using the latest AI to dive deeper, but I think also more automation needs to come. So I think, buyers like Maria need to just be able to easily upload their campaign list or download the data one way or another to have into their database, so they don't have to go show by show, or that it needs to be easier for them to access that data. So I think that's the kind of the phase that we're in now. And I think too, one thing is brand safety tools now, I think in a lot of cases can be overly restrictive, because as the creator of one, the incentive is for you to put out a tool that's more cautious so you don't get in trouble as the brand safety tool, because you just want to cover yourself. But then what ends up happening is you may limit a lot of content that may otherwise be perfectly fine for the advertiser. So I think with more advances in AI, we can get past that and have more content be deemed quote unquote safe. Yeah.
That's a really great point. And the one thing I want to add to that is to Pete's point, I don't want publishers to be afraid of brand safety in that it's going to swish your scale. It's actually a way to unlock dollars, not necessarily a way to say, okay, half your content's no good. It should be a lever, not a, this is bad content, this is good content. It's this content is acceptable for this brand, not acceptable for that brand. And that's, very nuanced. It's not, it should be exciting and not necessarily scary.
Yeah, great. And Pete, I was going to ask, just as a follow-up, when you talk about, companies that are using tools like yours to select shows, like there's the brand safety aspect, there's the contextual aspect, like how should people be thinking about using those types of tools to select shows for their campaigns today?
Yeah, I think with us, I mean, for our site now, people could go on if they have a show in mind. You could dive in and you could see, oh, what's the brand safety rating with examples in the chat GPT analysis of it according to GARM, or you could filter on shows that, hey, maybe are high in profanity, but low in hate speech or other factors, along with seeing maybe, oh, what's the renewal rate for the show or the audience info. So we have I'd say a planning tool. I know, like Maria mentioned, other partners are working on more of it, integrations with publishers specifically for the targeting, which I think is really powerful. I think, a number of publishers can enable that on their end. So I'd say there's the planning piece, there's the specific targeting in the buys, which is, less so us maybe in the future more, but through the publisher or other partners. And then I'd say the third piece where brand safety can be layered in is on the verification side of things. So this is one thing we will help with, where say you do buy a campaign, you put your podcast ads out there on dozens of shows or, millions of impressions, and it was supposed to be brand safe, but what happens if, that crazy guest comes on or something gets said? So you might want to be alerted to that. So there's the post or mid-campaign analysis alerting that I think is also something to keep in mind. So the planning, the targeting, and then the post-campaign or mid-campaign verification. So
we already talked a little bit about, kind of other, like streaming audio channels and whatnot. And I guess similar to those channels and things like, video, streaming audio, display, it's clear that more automated campaigns are starting to kind of take hold on the podcast space. Can any of you give us a sense of client sentiment and confidence in targeting, as well as the actual ad tech involved with that today when it comes to, podcasts, kind of automated campaigns?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the sentiment, the beauty of, let me take a step back. I think the beauty of podcasting is, it gives us the intimacy that radio gives us, but less waste when we layer on data targeting to reach the people we want to reach. That also comes with nuances when it comes to creative, which we'll talk about later. But, as more and more brands get into the space, scale is going to become an issue, right? Obviously, Joe Rogan is, for better or worse, the #1 podcast, and he does 1 million impressions, or 1 million downloads an episode. But, when we have clients who are looking to reach impression levels in the tens or hundreds of millions of impressions, like that is a very small fraction of the overall. So I think the data targeting capability allows us to achieve that scale. And as more and more publishers start to integrate with third-party audience data publishers, like a Nielsen or an Experian, it allows us to one, be more confident in the third-party targeting, but also allows us to streamline who our target is. So we're not running 14 different audience segments across different publishers. We can kind of streamline it. The increase in budgets for programmatic also helps with the DSPs like the Trade Desk. I think it's one of those things that it's going to keep growing as more and more clients get into the space and scale. It becomes a bigger KPI.
Another great question, and a little bit of a soapbox question for us. I've been lucky enough to be at the Trade Desk for a very long time, and we've launched a lot of products since I've been there. Mobile or pre-roll video or TV. And one of the things that we always say, the word that we use is parity. Can we reach targeting parity to display? If a buyer is in our platform and they're doing geo-targeting, audience targeting, retargeting, above the fold, below the fold, viewability target, they're doing all that in our platform. What's the equivalent in this new channel that we're launching? And that's the kind of the standard that we hold ourselves. When we launched TV, I think we did that pretty successfully. There's a big audience targeting component. Maybe we didn't reach that same contextual targeting component, but that's what we're still working on. And podcasting, when we launched that, I think we met the bar. So the advertisers that come into our platform, they can do first-party audience targeting, reaching folks who visited their website recently. They can do third-party audience targeting, retargeting, geo-targeting, man, all of it, really. But there are really two different camps of clients. It's the clients where when I log into the platform every morning and I'm seeing who's doing what, there's clients that are just on a tear. They are doing really advanced podcasting, targeted podcasting campaigns. But then I'll have a meeting with maybe one of our biggest clients, and all they knew was host-read advertising and podcasting. They really didn't know that you can sequential targeting reach somebody who just watched a video ad with a podcast ad in the platform. So I think we're really in that education phase when it comes to clients. I bet we're all feeling that up here. But I think we're winning. I think we're really showing clients what that podcasting has as much to offer as any other channel.
Great. Yeah, again, like you said, Tomas, we're all still educating, and I don't know if that's ever going to really end, because things are just going to keep progressing, right? Kind of getting on to the next topic, which I know is again probably one of the kind of most difficult topics to navigate for a lot of people that are new to the podcast advertising space. It's around data measurement and attribution. So how aware are advertisers about the data and analytics capabilities that are available in podcast advertising? And what kind of insights can they actually get from the data? And how can they use it to actually inform the decisions that they make?
So you would be surprised how many clients who are new to the space who really just do not know like pixel-based measurement, understand the measurement options that are out there, right? Like obviously a lot of the partners who are in, who are watching, or so they obviously the conversations they have really run the gamut, right? People who are really, they're like, talking to Pete or all the time, right? Or they're literally like, oh, there is measurement, like, what's a promo code or whatever. And so obviously we're getting more clients who are asking these questions, right? But probably the one piece of advice that I would bring to anybody who wants to get into advertising, there are a lot of people like, Jacob and Maria being two of them, right? Who really know the space, right? And understand the measurement in the space, and making sure you're working with people who understand the space, right? There are still a lot of clients out there, hey, they go out, they do it. Hey, maybe we try, but if you're not set up for success from a measurement standpoint, you're probably not going to buy podcasting yet, right? Like, obviously there are people who see success, right? Look at, BetterHelp, Athletic Greens, et cetera, spending like, 8 figures on podcasting. So obviously they're set up for success and they're doing it, right? But, and I would say one thing we're trying to work on is making sure the major holdcos are further further educating themselves, right, in all things in the measurement landscape, right? But basically, I think obviously Pete and Corey agree that there's still a ton of runway. I feel like this space is probably I would say it's the most exciting part of kind of the ad tech ecosystem right now because of how much is still very much undiscovered land.
Yeah, and just to add to that, audio is every bit as measurable as every other piece of media. Whether it's brand lift, any other sort of upper funnel metric, all the way down to, web conversion, sales lift, net new customers. And I think that's the important piece to hammer home is whatever your KPI is, we can measure against it. Whether that's directionally, within your own kind of podcast buy or as more MMM models start integrating podcasting, as more and more attribution partners start opening up, maybe not necessarily audio first attribution partners, but maybe more video first attribution partners start expanding into audio, we can start comparing it against other channels. And we've started to see that. Adelaide is an attention measurement partner we work with at Mediahub. They showed that podcasting ranks really high in terms of attention score, probably one of, if not the highest. So the research is already starting in terms of how does it compare to other channels, but with those capabilities continuing to evolve, that is what I'm excited about, is not just measuring audio in a silo. You never want to measure something on its own, but being able to compare it holistically across the rest of your campaign. And again, as we look at then, get into the nitty gritty of, did this partner perform or did this podcast perform? That's always, that's also great to know directionally is maybe we, we're new here, we don't renew here, we try something else. And even as we look at programmatic and running network solutions, it allows us an opportunity to optimize those, right? These 4 or 5 shows of a 20 show network are driving your performance. Let's optimize our deliveries there and maybe stop delivering the ones that aren't driving performance as well.
That's great. And Jacob, you mentioned brand lift. So there's obviously different types of data and attribution. I think one of the, it emerged with really, helping the DR advertisers support what they're trying to do. But now I think that more bigger brands are coming in. The brand lift topic is definitely, kind of picking up some steam. And I guess looking at brand lift, that kind of momentum that it's getting, how are those findings being seen and utilized by brand marketers to, kind of justify their investments and justify investing more than they are perhaps today?
I mean, I would say, jumping in, the first bullet that you had up on the screen there, I don't know if everyone could see, but, how do we bring more brand dollars into the space? It's through data. We all up here lived through the D2C days, and now we're in the brand phase, but we actually lived it when the only way we could measure success in the space was D2C advertisers kept coming back. So that's a good sign. They're spending more and more every time. But that proved it was performance. So what's next after that? And Brand Lift has given tools to our industry to allow brands to measure upper funnel metrics, KPIs, things like awareness, purchase intent, things that are important to brands that are spending big dollars in various other mediums now have an ability to measure that effectiveness in podcasting and in audio broadly. So giving data to the space to kind of demonstrate and prove that it is effective, allowing it to be compared to other formats. Again, data being that kind of singular metric. It's not subjective, it's objective, has helped a ton. And something that we're doing at Veritonic is a mix of attribution and brand lift. So there's top of the funnel measures, your brand lift KPIs, and then you have bottom of the funnel attribution measures. There's a lot of brands that need to understand what's happening at the top and bottom of the funnel. Thinking about any activity that you're doing, the impact that has on a brand KPI. Just because you might be measuring some near-term activity doesn't mean that your other KPIs at the top of the funnel aren't affected too. So I like thinking about how brand lift has, yes, totally elevated the space in terms of the types of brands and dollars that can come in, but also thinking about performance more holistically, top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, where it's valuable.
Right. In terms of the pixel tracking, how have you seen that evolve in terms of allowing brands and buyers and everybody using it to actually make decisions, optimizations, kind of midstream?
I think it's made a really big difference for the whole transactional period. So from start to finish, before we had pixels as an option, it was like, well, we'll see who's coming back, like you said. But what's happening now is there's a lot more strategy rolled into the plans that we're putting together. There's so many more tactics than there were even a few years ago. Just being able to layer on the targeting. People are coming up with really creative ways to use their inventory and creating run of network bundles that are fun and really contextually on the nose. Understanding what shows are working, being able to apply a pixel to all of these different tactics and really understanding what works for a specific client is guiding the strategy on the front end, and then it's guiding the optimization throughout, which I think is so exciting because it allows brands to say, okay, you're not just saying here's a one size fits all plan that goes to all of our clients. It's this client A, this works for you, this does not, and then I'm trying to prove it out. So that's exciting to see as we go through the whole life cycle, I guess, of the campaign. And it's guiding what we're doing pretty dramatically. To Jacob's point about holistic measurement, it's going to be directional. We're comparing against ourselves. I'm comparing show A against show B against run of network A against behavioral segment C. But what we're trying to do at Horizon is creating our own holistic piece where we can understand the fractional attribution. So I think that's exciting. Being able to do that from a third party is exciting. There's so much white space that's still to come. So we'll see how that evolves.
Yeah.
So I think that's super interesting what Maria's saying. The first thing I might note to brands is pixels add a lot of data. I wouldn't consider them necessarily a magic bullet. There is modeling and there's various things where they're not 100% complete. That being said, Maria touched on one use case, but I can go into that use case. So two concrete use cases for data being used that I think both brands like, and I think that also publishers that they like and benefit too. So the first one that Maria, I was afraid she was going to go into it too much and steal my point. But where brands will do a run of network buy on a publisher, and they'll put, they won't use a separate promo code for every individual show because there might be dozens or hundreds of shows, who knows? So then they'll just pixel the run of network buy, and then we can tell them which of your shows in that bundle perform well. So then you can assess from there which of the shows in that bundle might have a more engaged audience, might be better, more receptive to the method or to the message. And then the buyers can then go talk to those shows directly and do maybe a host thread or pursue a deeper partnership with them. And some publishers, may be a little bit hesitant to expose that level of transparency, but I think in the end, we're seeing a number actually like it because it helps them sell run of network bundles for a great purpose that then lead to more sales, and it can help them see which of their shows at a glance are working quite well. So that's one use case. The other, which actually we were talking about before, that people are using pixel measurement for, is to see the overlap between different shows. So say you're buying on 10 shows, but 9 of the shows have the same, share the same basic audience. So, but one of them is unique. So in theory, you could cut 80 of your shows and be targeting the exact same people. So exposing that, I think, is one interesting thing that we see buyers starting to do also on our platform, to know which shows are giving you the unique reach. And we don't have it yet, but I think soon we'll have it where you can say, oh, I want to add this show. How much unique reach will this have based on the overlap from what I'm already targeting? So I think there's a number of interesting use cases already going and to come with it.
Yeah, I think just to kind of add on to that, one of the really good trends I think in the industry that we're super supportive of is, like you said, the transparency to allow buyers to see, hey, where am I actually landing here, and then how can we optimize? I think early days it was a bit of a black box in the podcasting ecosystem, and that's a good trend, opening up a little bit more transparency for everybody, I think. Kind of follow up on the last question. Another topic that kind of comes into play with pixel tracking is frequency. So not only like seeing what frequency you're getting, like I'm curious what people's thoughts are about, what are the best practices around frequency capping? It's a good thing, but what are the numbers?
I
Maybe
think
it depends.
frequency capping, there needs to be frequency capping, especially as we evolve into a space where we're layering on more and more targeting, because the more targeting you're handicapping the scale. But we have a lot of brands that are, maybe they're higher priced, maybe they just take a little long to consider. It's not like you're not just going to click on it and buy it today. And for brands like that, I do think you need a higher frequency, just so that people continue to hear the message and continue to consider it. So I think we have other brands where reach is key. So again, brand by brand, you have different goals. So being able to identify this type of plan delivers this type of frequency, and this type of plan delivers a lower frequency, higher reach. Those are key metrics that will help us to understand what we should be doing for each individual client. So having a handle on just being able to measure it alone, I think helps us overall.
I think what Maria's saying, definitely, I don't think anyone would argue today that there needs to be proper frequency capping that works in the podcasting space. I think that might be, I think everybody agrees on that. As to then, so I think there's some work to be done there, but as to what the ideal frequency is, I think it definitely depends on the brand. I think, some people aren't going to purchase, some expensive car or, some item on, hearing it once. I do think in general, what we see a lot of our brands do is attempt to first optimize reach to get all the low hanging fruit out there, particularly for products that aren't super high end. So they try to get as much reach as they can, get all the low hanging fruit. And in podcasting, for many brands, that's a lot. For some, maybe if you're BetterHelp or Athletic Greens, you've maybe already exhausted all the low hanging fruit many times over out there. But that's definitely a strategy a lot of brands we see do, just get the low hanging fruit first, and then, go to get them more times.
So we're talking about data here, and all this data is coming, into the buyers and into the brands, and people are kind of looking at that. I guess, is the perception that the data coming over, is the perception that it's accurate, consistent in measuring the outcomes across, all these different measurement tools that are available today?
I mean, I'm going to have a somewhat biased point of view, so maybe we can ask others, but I'll start. I think it depends on where you're getting your measurement from, who you're getting it from. I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in, trust in your measurement partner is key. And that is predicated on credibility. So making sure you're working with someone that you think actually knows what they're doing, what they're measuring, right? And I also think independence and unbiased point of view is really important in offering measurement and data that are going to inform decisions where people are spending money. So I start there. And I like to think it is trusted. I think it's why we're having this conversation. I think it's why you're seeing the podcast growth numbers that we're seeing on the ad front. It's why brands are getting into the space, because they trust the performance and they trust the measures that are telling them it's performing really well. I would say that a shift I've seen, and I think it's really great, is more of that measurement coming to the source. So it's coming to the brands and the agencies that are controlling the spend. So instead of, we're going to rewind 5 years ago, the measurement would be kind of sitting with the different networks and the publishers, and you might get a view of it. Now, the people that are actually in charge of deciding the strategy and spending the money are the ones that want that measurement, and they want that holistic view, not just for one partner, but all their partners. So I think that it's demonstrated that it's trustworthy and it's accurate based on the growth that we've seen, and the fact that it's unlocking the kind of dollars from the brands that we're having those conversations with.
Where do you think we are right now in terms of the efforts to incorporate podcast data into more holistic cross-channel measurement capabilities?
This one's a tough one, and I think there might be a little theme of some of my answers where I think there's a big difference between what I see in platform versus what I see in boardrooms. Like I said, I come in every morning, I log into the Trade Desk platform, and I just see what our clients are up to and how they're buying podcast inventory. And I see some really advanced stuff. So a couple months ago, I saw a gym, someone who's selling gym classes, like one of those companies. And they set up a podcast campaign next to a TV campaign, next to a display campaign, next to a pre-roll video campaign. And they just said, optimize towards cost per acquisition. We want to drive people getting to our page and registering for a class. And they just let it go. that is real advanced stuff. You're taking all these channels and you're just kind of letting the platform optimize itself. And podcast is there, and that's a cross-channel use case right there. But then I'll go into a really high level boardroom in a holdco, and they're like, why would we even entertain podcasts, especially programmatically? It's not cracking the MMM model. Like, why would we do that? So I think there's a kind of a big change and between what I'm seeing in platform versus what I'm hearing in boardrooms. But I think what's going to help us are the consumers, are the listeners. As we go from 120 million monthly listeners to cracking, 200 million, we will start appearing on the MMM model. We will start turning heads. And I don't think we're too far away. And I also think that you're going to start hearing those stories of what I'm seeing in platform. You're going to start hearing that more and more in the ecosystem, and people are going to start believing. So similar to your point, Corey, it's really about building trust, and the consumers are going to help us do that.
All right, let's shift gears here a little bit. I think we've hammered the data point hard here. Let's shift from the science over to the art, side of things here, and talk a little bit about, kind of ad creative and formats. In terms of formats, what are the most innovative and effective approaches for driving results? And how can advertisers strike a balance between delivering a seamless ad experience and achieving their actual, objectives and goals?
Yeah, creative is, a media campaign is only as good as the creative. And so,
Yay. Yes. Yes. So true.
Creative is, to me, one of the most important things that we need to keep in mind as we start talking about scaling what podcasts are and introducing data targeting and run of network. I think we, the 7 of us up here can agree. We don't want to be reusing radio or streaming audio ads in podcasts. We want to make sure that the ad experience is unique to a podcast. Obviously, host reads are what everyone knows and loves. And anytime you get to unlock a known voice, a sought out voice for your brand, that's always great. It's not quite practical when we start looking at run of network and programmatic campaigns where, we're looking at, 20 shows, 100 shows, 200 shows, in terms of an inclusion list. And if we want to look at, a host read across all of those shows, if we have a client that's very particular in how their creative is read, that's a lot of approvals that we have to go through. And I don't think any of us in this room or on the call really want to sit through that process. So that's where, announcer reads do come into play, but we want to make sure that the ad experience is unique to the podcast in the sense that, the creative should be tailored towards what kind of podcast we're running on. If we're running in a comedy podcast, maybe the creative takes a more comedic tone, but that creative wouldn't necessarily work in a more news focused podcast. So keeping that in mind, and I think even with a data driven or programmatic campaign, we can still kind of target by format and say, all right, in our sports podcast, let's run a sports focused ad. Let's run a news focused ad in our news. And I think that allows us to achieve our scale while keeping the user experience in mind, because the last thing we want to start doing is watering down the user experience, right? We don't want to just start injecting 8 million ads into a podcast, because then listeners lose interest. That's one of the benefits of listening to a podcast is it's relatively uncluttered with ads. And so what the balance is, I don't know, because if I knew that and I had the formula, I'd be in Cannes somewhere on a yacht, probably retired. But it's finding the balance of host read media with the scale that programmatic offers, and with that the creative that comes with those tactics.
I think one of the things that we struggle with a little bit is there are quite a few creative options, even when you talk about programmatic, but we're spending so much time just like getting people in the door, or just like on the basics of this whole thing. I'm like, let's not get too fancy here, right? So
the one more thing I want to add to that is that balance is going to change. There's no golden rule, right? It's going to change from client to client.
Yeah. So let's talk about around creative, some best practices, tips for creating compelling podcast ads that resonate with listeners and drive brand awareness. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to speak from a pre-recorded ad mentality. Again, programmatic, you're not going to have a lot of host threads. And I just want to comment really quick on the previous answer. I truly believe that in market dynamics, if you have more supply than you have demand, you have to reduce friction for demand. to access supply. And I think we've actually been a little bit precious about the creative process. And I think we've maybe stifled a little bit of demand because of it. Again, I'm biased. I'm in the pre-recorded ad industry, so take that with a grain of salt. But I do think there's a real opportunity to grow the industry a little bit more using pre-recorded spots. And so I will get to the tips. And these are tips for pre-recorded spots, not necessarily host ads. This is somewhere where I've been learning. And I've read some really cool studies. One of them saying that actually longer advertisements, 35 seconds or longer, do better in the podcast environment. This is a little bit weird for us, for the folks who are buying digital audio music streaming, where you are locked into 15, 30, or 60. In podcasting, sometimes those ad pods aren't as strict, so you get to play a little bit with the length. So 35 seconds or longer is what I'm seeing performance most. Repetition, when the listeners listen to a podcast, they might be really into the content. They might be kind of tuning out, even a pre-recorded ad or a host-read ad. So repeating the brand message, repeating the call to action, adding a lot of repetition into your creative is pretty key. And something that everybody would tell you is sonic branding. I really I can't get that Taco Bell out of my ears and my head after I hear it. There's also one right next to my house, right when I turn it. But yeah, when you're in your brand review process every year, your brand's thinking about, okay, what's our brand identity? Make sonic branding a part of that conversation. Not enough brand have that as an asset. So those are my 2 tips.
Let's kind of start moving towards wrapping up here today, and let's talk about some future predictions. First, let's talk about how do you see the integration of technology and AI shaping the future of podcast advertising? Are there any specific advancements or tools that advertisers should be thinking about or paying attention to?
I'll take that one. I think most people here probably played around with ChatGPT or Bard these days. So it's clear there's definitely been some AI breakthroughs fairly recently. So, and I think they're only going to continue to come even faster. So I don't think there's really an area of podcasting it's not going to touch to be or totally transformed. Two examples I saw recently in the space. I think Podchaser, they put out some, where it's like, oh, it can help you discover shows using AI. I know Spotify put out their piece where using AI, they could, I don't know how much it's live now, but auto generate ads for you. So maybe say it's a Rogan ad, but for an advertiser he's never actually even isn't necessarily aware of, and say it's somebody in the South, you can make it in a Southern accent or a local dialect perhaps, or you could tune it to maybe it's like rainy that day. So I think there will probably be a lot more of that going on. Some ways we've started using AI are, one, with the ChatGPT and the brand safety element. Another way is, I think we're going to announce it, I think, next week, but also a host sort of controversy feature using Bard, because it's got much more real-time integration. So then it could scan the news and kind of give a flavor for what's the host's controversy level. We want to use it more for labeling ads and podcasts, to label way more shows and retry the same one many times to get a flavor for how the DAI ads are being inserted more than like a couple times. So I think those are all interesting things we're doing. As far as where it's going, I think sooner or later, it might be a while, but there may be, I think, an AI that has access to all the show's transcripts, knows who all the listeners are, knows how they're shared between shows, knows who's advertising on each of the shows, knows from an advertiser which of their ads have worked where, which advertisers have spent on it, and it'll just say, oh, here's the creative you should use on these 3 shows of Dave's, and put it in the mid-roll, and it might dynamically optimize it on the fly. But so I think maybe that's a little bit far out, but I think that's all going to be eventually, some flavor of that will certainly be coming sooner or later, maybe later. But
we can all just go to the beach and
press the button,
let the AI
on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I can add
go ahead, Chris.
on the AI side, So it's funny because AI now is like, it's a must have and everyone gets it. They're bought in, but like literally rewind like a year and a half ago. And we were like, I don't know. How do I assess it? Is it trustworthy? So we were doing AI for the past almost 5 years, ingesting ads, creative, and predicting their performance. And now having AI be an embraced engine, let's call it, knowing how an ad's going to perform based on historical data and based on all the data that we collect on the performance side is pretty powerful. So in your use case, where you're starting to think real time, on the fly decision making, what creative should go where, thinking about pre-recorded, that use case to me has a lot of application. But I find it funny that if we had this conversation 18 months ago, people would be like, skeptical and like, well, no, it's real. And the longer it's running, the more valuable it is because it's got more data that's crunching. So I think that's going to be particularly impactful for some of the programmatic and the scale-based work that you guys are doing.
I agree with that. All of the tips that you just mentioned, I completely agree with, and I think most of them also apply to host-read ads. But the AI aspect of it, being able to change voices makes me scared. I like it for what you're doing. If you're talking about produced reads, then let's make him sound like he's from the South. Let's do whatever. But I don't like taking actual people's voices and adjusting.
There's a moral dilemma in there. It's interesting.
Like I want Joe Rogan to have seen my product and to give an authentic voice read. I don't know. It depends whether that works or not. I think is a different question, but
it is very interesting.
The ethics of it, I think, is interesting.
Fake authenticity.
Yes,
right?
yes,
yes.
And I don't know that you can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, let's kind of wrap up before we ask for some questions here. Let's talk predictions, trends. So what do you see as, what should we be keeping an eye on for the rest of this year into 2024 as it pertains to, brands and podcast advertising?
So obviously a lot of people in the room obviously have seen the predictions that Matt was talking about in terms of the revenue and the growth, which is obviously really exciting, right? And I think for us to get there, it is going to be coming really from a lot of net new clients to the space, right? It's not, hey, we know the clients who've been spending, hopefully they will continue to spend, which is really great, right? But there's so many clients who still have not fully explored, brand safety, attribution, programmatic, right? And I think it all dives into the idea of audio truly as a fully fledged digital channel. I talk about that a lot in the lines of search, social, and video, right? It's not it's not just part of the digital bucket. It's a channel, right? Hey, what is your search strategy? What is your social strategy? And with the amount of time spent in podcasting, what is your podcast strategy? So I think my wishful prediction and hope, right, is that it's more of the further ascension, right, of podcasting as a fully fledged channel, which leads into just more people diving in the space and utilizing more of what we've talked about today.
Else predictions?
Oh, I'll make one. We talked a little bit about it, but I think creative having a bigger seat at the table, it just continues to improve. We talk so much about what format, what media type, what channel we're going to run in. And then within that, what kind of ad placement? Is it a 15? Is it a 30? Is it a 60? And who are we targeting? And one of the most equal impactful, or if not more, components of that equation is the creative. What are you actually saying? What does it sound like? How is it going to perform for you? And interestingly, it's one of the things that's closest to the brand and agency's control. It's like that's kind of directly in their application. So I see that already turning. There's a lot more interest in measuring creative, appreciating the value of creative, and giving it a kind of an equal footing in that equation for making audio as performant as possible. And I think to your point about supply and demand, as there's scarcity of supply, what other levers do you have, right? And how do you control performance? And it is about what are you saying? And whether you're saying it to 1 million people or 10 people, if what you're saying is impactful and performant, that's your value, right? So I double down on creative. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to summarize, I think we're all right now really happy to be in the podcast ecosystem, right? It's a good time to be here because it's not one thing that's kind of pushing this forward. It's a lot of things, propelling us at the same time. And I think it's just a the future looks great. So, with that, thanks so much for everybody coming today and, online and in person. Questions? Or do we cover everything? You don't have any questions?
Guys, thanks so much. That was fantastic. No surprise that it was fantastic, but it was fantastic. My question first, I have 1,000 questions, but I'm gonna limit it to just one. Jacob, could you repeat what you said earlier about audio being as measurable as any other channel?
Yeah, it really is. It is as measurable as any other digital channel. We can pretty much put a pixel on anything these days. So, and audio is no exception. So just because audio isn't clickable, we can measure people going to a website. We can measure, exposure in terms of brand, what's the brand lift among people exposed versus an unexposed control group. And I think that's something that should be reiterated, and I will shout it from the rooftops until someone tells me to stop. But we can
stop.
measure audio just as much as every other channel in media mix.
Thank you. I have a million questions too, but I'll try to keep it down to one. There's like a top 20, set of podcasts that everybody listens to, but I mean, there's just like millions out there. I would love your thoughts on kind of that next level down. What's happening there, and like what people should know about like how to buy in that space.
And I know we. It's funny because actually, I know Edison has a good stat on this, where if you bought the top 10 shows, right, the highest reaching shows, right, you reach, and including Joe Rogan, which again, I'll leave my, any opinions of Joe Rogan offside of this, right? But like the top 10 shows, right, you'd be reaching 35% of weekly podcast listeners, right? Which is a lot, but it's also 65% of listeners that you're not reaching, right? And I think a lot of people, they go and when they buy for the first time, like, oh, I'm going to buy Smart List, I'm going to buy The Daily, I'm going to buy Joe Rogan, I'm going to buy Crime Junkie, which again, a lot of them are great shows, right? But like, there are so many, there are a lot of shows. We were talking, leading into this, but we think there are probably about 5,000-ish or so, roughly speaking, like we call them commercially viable podcasts. And a lot of them, they may have 50,000 listeners an episode, but for people who, again, listen on an average of 9 podcasts a week, like that's as big of a show to them, or as impactful, right, as a show that reaches millions of people. And so they're really and it is a way to get people involved in that. Now, I think there are challenges of like, well, what show of 25,000? There are thousands of shows. I think one thing that a stat that is mentioned a lot that hurts us a bunch, right, is the fact, there are 3 million shows on Apple Podcasts. Mm-hmm. They're really like 5,000. And I think you think of like how many shows we're in on cable or stuff of that sort is big. The other thing is, I think there is, and I wish maybe I could do a better job practicing what we preach here, but I also think, it is funny that nobody's really starting a website these days with a way of making money from advertising, right? Like, it's like, but like there are a lot of people who are kind of quote unquote, we're talking about like the middle class of podcasting. You can still have a viable business, right? Like, or, viable career, like growing and building a listenership of say 50 to 100,000 people an episode. Like if I started a website and I only got 50,000 monthly unique users, I would probably not quit Hearts and Science, right? And so there is also a desire. This is one of the few, there's a reason why people start a Substack and they start a podcast, right? Because they see the viability in podcasting. So one thing I would recommend, even though again, like there obviously are a lot of, great ways to buy with an SXM, a Spotify, iHeart, etc. There's a vast and very, very vibrant ecosystem. In a lot of ways, the space has thrived outside of the main ways, out of the ad tech, kind of ecosystem.
The other thing I would add to that is the authenticity of the space has always been, I hate to even use the word authenticity because it's constantly used in this channel, but you lose it when you're only focusing on those top shows. Yes, they're all great. Yes, they speak authentically, but you're not going to believe that a billionaire is shopping at X store. You want to hear it from somebody who you feel is relatable. And those mid-tier shows, that's where people feel like this is my friend. They're not tuning into a celebrity's podcast or someone famous. They're thinking of this person as their peer. And if their peer is doing this thing, buying this brand, shopping at this store, they believe that because they are. So tapping into that, I think, is really valuable too.
I like to let me talk about Bernie Sanders real quick. I think the podcast industry and the marketplace is very good for the 1%. It's very good for the 1% top shows, and it's very good for the 1% top advertisers, and everybody else is being left out a little bit. And it's really challenging. I think it's really challenging for mid-sized advertisers and really challenging for mid-sized podcasts. And I think one of the ways we kind of open up the waters and bring everybody in is with trust, automation, and scalability. And brand safety is a huge piece of that. If you have a big CPG company who comes into the space, their job is to reach everybody in the United States. Let's say it's, a shampoo company. They want everybody with a head of hair. And so podcasts, the way it's set up right now with host reads, it's not really a scalable option for them. Even if they did nail the top 50 shows, they have to pick up the phone and do that host read over and over and over. It's from our perspective, thinking about that pre-recorded ad, those pre-recorded ads invite so many people to come in, both mid-sized podcasters and large advertisers who just want to reach as many people as possible, but they can only do that with safeguards in place. And that's why stuff like targeting, measurability, brand safety, we really need to get these brands to trust that this is a good marketplace to invest in.
So I've got one too. So Tomas, picking up on that point you made about a small gym doing more advanced targeting than a big holdco that's using MMM to see where they want to put their spend. To me, that's such a distillation of where we are. Like big brands want incremental reach, but they don't know that they get that reach with niche, right? So here's my question to this group. What are the signals that are needed now to expose the audience intel or the brand safety signals that's going to give those big brands the comfort they need?
I am so encouraged to have these big agencies on the panel here today, and to see the Horizon announcement about the Center of Excellence. Let's for podcasting. Yeah, we saw this in display with viewability, where there was big CPG companies, big advertisers who's like, I don't want to do programmatic display advertising. Like, there's not enough safeguards out there. I'll keep cutting direct IOs with all the portals and I'll build scale that way. But, it doesn't invite enough scale into the marketplace. The holding companies and the agency folks that you see above you, they're going to be the folks who set the standard. They're going to be the folks who are going to evaluate all the platforms in the marketplace and say, this is the standard for all of my agency clients. And there's actually, like we've talked about before, there's a ton of data points. The standards are being written right now. And I think it's a really exciting time. But maybe they're going to be better at advising that.
So we got time for one more, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. Yeah. Hey. So I have a comment and then a question. So my first comment was, it's just ironic because we hear a lot of roadblocks that say that in podcasting it's not measurable, but then we say that only the top amount of shows have scale, which I find is kind of, ironic, right? Like, how can you say that the industry is measurable, but then you're only saying 50 shows have listeners, right? In our reporting, we see 250,000 shows with impressions, at least 50,000 with 10 right in the past month. So and my question is this: last week on the audio board, I did some quick math on that call, but the average revenue per listener for podcasting collectively is like $1 a month, right? The ARPU, which is a common phrase used in like mobile apps, So quickly, and I think this is also what Eric was just asking, like, how do we, grow that? Like, what's the fastest path? Is it simply showing incrementality, or, what is it? Like, how do we get from $1 per listener per month on average to something that we see at Spotify or Facebook, which is, $10, $20, $30 a month?
I think data helps with that. Like the increase in programmatic puts advertisers in podcasts that they wouldn't normally know about. So if you have, like we're 7 people up here, and you said, even if it's 5,000 podcasts and 1,000 of them have 25,000 downloads or less, like that, there's not enough time in the day for us to individually sort through those podcasts, as Maria said earlier. So I think programmatic and data-driven opportunities allow us to target an audience wherever they're listening. Now, obviously, we put brand safety guidelines in place, right? We don't want to be in the political content. We don't want to be in the news talk content. But, we know people are listening to podcasts that aren't in the top 10, top 25, top 50. And so by leveraging audience data and saying we want to reach parents with kids, right? We can look at reaching them in those top 50 podcasts, but we can also look at those smaller podcasts. And that brings, from a publisher perspective, and I'm not a publisher, so again, take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but that opens up more advertisers to your shows, and allows more ad inventory to be taken up. And I assume that's part of the issue, is just there's unsold inventory. So the more inventory you sell, and is more revenue per show, per user, and programmatic helps with that, and data-driven approaches help with that.
One thing I'd like, is like, okay, well, one thing I'm always thinking of these guys too is like when we're talking to like our own internal like strategy leads or overall clients. So like, let's say they're launching a new product, right? And they have $10 million to invest. I'm just using a round number, right? I'm thinking like, how do we make audio and podcasting say like 10 to 20% of that, right? And they're really unlocking that is I'm thinking every client has their own, it could be literally anything of like, what is that pie, right? And how am I dividing that pie, right? For some clients, it literally is, hey, what's the MMM, right? And if the whoever M provider is not using IP address in any form, right? That is a challenge that is, that we're running into, right? It could be like, hey, we're really into attention. Hey, if we're working with Adelaide, they're really dialed in on podcasting. Hey, that's awesome, right? And so one is like, and it's kind of almost like we're the translator, right? And that like, hey, this is where they are. So we're like, what is that translation point? And the problem is every client's different. This is why I alluded to earlier, but making sure you have people who really can understand and walk you through that those translation points, right? Because if you go in, and I know you guys have been on, in meetings before, you're like, hey, like, what's that? Like, what do you mean Apple Podcasts? I can't figure out like the streaming or whatever, right? Or I stream my podcast, I don't download it. Like if you get into that, like you're probably not getting into those translation points, right? And so where we've seen success is going in and saying, hey, like what is success to you, right? Like performance can mean a lot of things. Like brand lift can be performance, right? It doesn't have to be a promo code, right? And so we're always just consistently whatever. And again, it's literally you talk to 100 clients and they're going to give you 100 different answers, right? And it's that unique translation point that we're not doing enough of, and that is the one thing holding us back from it all.
I agree with everything these guys said. The MMM thing, I think getting a more granular view from MMM, I think would be really beneficial, just because if you're looking at podcasts as a channel, there's so many different ways to buy and so many different shows you're buying, and one show could kind of destroy your MMM, and that's an ideal. I like what Veritonic's doing in terms of being able to pixel and then also layer on those upper funnel metrics, because you're understanding these people actually heard this ad and then were they impacted versus just kind of
modeling an audience,
right?
Look-alike,
that's not
whatever.
really helpful.
I think that's all we got time for. I'm getting the signal back here from Matthew. So
awesome. Yeah.
good.
Thank you everyone so much for joining, and for everyone joining us virtually. If you guys have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to Libsyn. You can go ahead and scan the QR code or reach them at sales@advertisecast.com. Additionally, thank you for joining one of our brand academies. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can feel free to take this survey, scan the QR code here. Looks like we have a whiteboard that's opened up somehow. But thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on our next brand academy.